Hey everyone, good evening, and welcome to one of our Orange County Library events. This is going to be Florida's Haunted Love Stories. It's presented by this fantastic author, podcaster, teacher, folklorist. Basically, he's really great. If you were here last week, it's still Christopher Balzano talking about the subject matter he has written about in his new book, Florida's Haunted Love Stories. Before we get started, I would like to just go over a few housekeeping things. This is an event as part of our Florida's Big Read NEA Big Read series. We have tons of great programming based around the book Pretty Monsters by Kelly Link. I'll be throwing a link in the chat to check out all of the events and more information on the series. And also from that link, you can request a craft pack. That craft pack includes a free copy for you to keep of Pretty Monsters by Kelly Link. And in addition to that, a few different crafts, which we have the instructions for on our YouTube page, and across the all the information can be found on that Big Read website, which I will be posting in chat here in just a second. Without any further ado, I wanted to introduce Christopher Balzano for our event tonight. Christopher, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me again. I'm really excited about this one. This is, I'm excited because I am promoting my book, which is coming out in about a week, 14 days, Florida's Haunted Love Stories, and I thought I would try to tailor this a little bit to your patrons, because I am offering not only 2 stories which are not in the book. So it's not even like if you watch the presentation tonight, I'm going to talk all about the stories and you've already now known them. And so I'm going to give you 2 that are not in the book that I recently did within the past year, as well as some that people that are in your library system, people that are in Orange County, can maybe even go and legend trip themselves. So if I don't freak you out too much by what we talk about tonight, you can actually go to these places yourself.
I know getting freaked out too much might be a distinct possibility.
Well, hopefully you freaked out a little bit.
Yeah.
Let me start here. So as I said, this is Florida's Haunted Love Stories. My name is Christopher Balzano. The main thing that I do is I run a podcast, which you can get anywhere that you get your podcast, whether it's iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or anything like that. I also am now on midnight.fm, which is a paranormal radio network. And I like to say these all come from the files of Tripping on Legends. These are all things that, especially the ones tonight, that I've been to. I've legend tripped that. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, especially for those of you guys who weren't here last week. Right now, I'm a teacher. I'm a high school teacher. I got into this about 25 years ago, documenting and essentially telling stories, or getting other people's stories and then kind of crafting them and retelling them to others. I was one of the first people on the internet with a website dedicated to spooky things from a specific area. I'm from Massachusetts. And just by the mere fact that I was one of the first people on, it was a very popular website, and it got a lot of people giving me feedback, right? Or telling me their ghost stories because they were online, which allowed me to discover this area called the Bridgewater Triangle, which is like this book right here, and my first book, which was called Dark Woods. In doing that, that kind of set me on my paranormal path, and I became more of an investigator. So I kind of put the folklore, the storytelling aspect aside, and I was actually investigating a lot of these places, which eventually kind of became not boring for me, but everyone was doing that. Right now, Ghost Hunters was popular. I am not a ghost hunter. I am not a ghostbuster, especially, I always say. So I stepped away, and I came back with this idea that what I wanted to do was not care about whether a story was true or not. Ghost stories are true because we believe them. So rather than going out and trying to get evidence and loading myself up with all this stuff, I rely on my 5 senses and my 6th sense. The majority of work that I do comes before I go to a place and after I get back from it, because I use these stories to tell really the history and the sociological aspects of the community, right? I always say ghosts tell us about the dead, but ghost stories tell us about the living. And so these experiences that I have are really about the communities that they're involved in. So legend tripping, which is what I do now, is not going out and trying to use thermal imaging and EMF meters and all these things, gadgets you might see on TV to try to capture evidence. Instead, what I do is I go out and experience it. And sometimes I come back, almost every time I come back, with something profound having happened. It's just I can't necessarily then give it to you guys. Although tonight, I am going to be giving you some of the things that I've collected over the years. I always like to say, too, my nickname to many people is the Pukwudgie guy. That's these little guys here in the corner. As I was writing my book, I started to come across a lot of people who were having the same experience of these little troll-type creatures. And in digging deep into archives and books and doing research, I found this term Pukwudgie. And since then, I've published that stuff, and in the last 15 years especially, it's exploded. There was nothing on the internet when I started about them, and now there's Pukwudgie beer. There's a band called Pukwudgie, and I always like to say J.K. Rowling stole my research on Pukwudgies when she created the American version of Hogwarts and has never paid me. So if any of you guys want to email or tweet out to J.K. Rowling, she's very active, and tell her she needs to kick me a few dollars, I would really appreciate that. The first story I'm going to talk about tonight, I don't usually wear T-shirts in a presentation, but I just happen to be wearing my Silver Springs shirt tonight for you guys because it's the first story we're going to talk about. Silver Springs has got to be one of the most active haunted places that I've ever heard of, definitely in Florida. Not necessarily active during the day. So if you go there during the day, you won't see stuff. But if you talk to anybody who works there, they're going to tell you of their experiences. A lot of those experiences have to do with things like missing something, like the workers are missing, they need a special wrench or they need a part, they can't find it, they ask for it, and all of a sudden they turn around and it's right there where they just were looking. People have seen faces floating over in the windows of some of the new halls, especially that are there. If you don't know what Silver Springs is, it was originally opened in, sorry, I always forget the date. It was originally opened in the 1870s. If you ask them, they'll say that they were open since the 1830s and people loved to go there. But officially in the 1870s, they started what is, I guess, somewhat unique at that time, which were glass bottom boats. So they were one of the first places to really just take the bottom of a boat and make it glass, and they would go through and show all of the tourists the spectacular, beautiful things that were in this water. And you can kind of see the water in the picture on the right. This was the most popular attraction in Florida. This was before Disney World. This was essentially Disney World before Disney World. It was extremely popular. And over this spring, people have seen these giant orbs. So I'm not sure if you guys know what orbs are, and maybe you've heard that term if you're into ghosts. And usually what it means is someone has captured a picture, and in that picture there's a ball of light that they can't explain. And most times, trust me, I wrote an entire book on how to take pictures of ghosts. Most times it's dust, or it's a reflection, or I'm not talking about those kinds of orbs. If you talk to anyone who has been at Silver Springs at nighttime, like guards, or in the early morning, like the people when they arrive there, they will tell you they see these basketball, sometimes more of like grapefruit, sometimes basketball-sized balls of light, three-dimensional, drifting over certain parts of the water. They'll tell you that they've seen a mysterious canoe with someone rowing it that rows out to a part of the water and then disappears. I actually talked to several employees who said they then took a boat out there trying to find it, thinking that someone was in trouble. Someone is not in trouble. They're ghosts, right? And over the years, Silver Springs has reinvented itself. It's recreated itself. That's a picture right there of an area over here now it's called the Abyss. But it used to be called the Bridal Chamber. And it was called the Bridal Chamber because there was a story as to what had happened at that exact location. It's the story of Claire and Bernice. Now, I know you guys don't have the ability to stop me as I'm talking, but feel free to go, ooh, 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 ooh. I know that when you recognize elements of this story. So Claire, who in this story is the male, Claire was the son of a rich plantation owner near Silver Springs. He fell in love with Bernice, who was one of his dad's employees. And their romance was absolutely forbidden. They were not supposed to be together. How dare you fall in love with someone who is below your station in life? And so the father wanted to keep them apart. Anytime they could, they would escape. They would go to Silver Springs. This is well before it was a shooting location for The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and well before it was the movie set for the Tarzan movies and the TV show. This was when it was in its absolute purest form, and they would meet and they would row on the water, and they would profess their love for each other. That's beautiful, right? This is Florida haunted love stories. Well, Claire's father sent him away, and he sent him over to Europe, and he told the people who he was sending him to keep him there as long as they could. Do not let him return to the States. Bernice, over time, started to grow really sad. She missed him horribly. And her health began to deteriorate. And she felt she confided in this woman who they called Auntie. And she said, Auntie, I know I'm going to die. Please row me out to the bridal chamber where we used to kind of sit and kiss and fall in love. Sweet. Auntie did that for her. And as she did it, Bernice was stroking a bracelet which had been Claire's mother, that he had given to her as a sign of his love. And she looked at Auntie and she dove into the water, essentially committing suicide. And it's said by Auntie that the water, or something the bottom of the water, opened up and swallowed her whole and sucked her in. Well, a few days later, Bernice actually found his way back to the States and back to Silver Springs and asked where was Bernice. And Auntie told him, nope, she's committed suicide. She's dead. She died. And I'll show you where she is. And Auntie took the canoe, took him out to the bridal chamber, and he was so overwhelmed with grief that he jumped from the boat himself. And it said that at that moment, her hand reached out of the darkness, grabbed his, pulled him down into the water with her. That's the picture that you see right here. And they are forever in love on the water. And that those lights that you see are actually Claire and Bernice showing their love for each other, are still sailing across the water that they once loved so much. It's an amazing story, right? And it explains, this is the good thing, it explains what people are experiencing. People are really seeing these ghost lights. They are seeing these weird shadows on the water. And Claire and Bernice were an amazing way to communicate that, right? And Auntie would tell the story. She became an attraction. She became almost as popular as the people who were riding the boats. People would come up to her. They would gather around like a little kindergarten story time, and she would tell this story over and over again. People absolutely loved it. The sailors, the captains of the boats would do the same thing. Only problem is Claire and Bernice never existed. So whereas that story is an amazing story and we connect to it and it explains what goes on, Claire and Bernice never actually were in existence. There's no record of them whatsoever. But that doesn't really stop a good ghost story, does it? In the 1930s, a man by the name of Ross Allen came to Silver Springs. And his big thing, and you guys probably know of this story and know of him and know of some of the wacky things he did. He added an animal park to Silver Springs, making it even more popular. If you've ever heard of the Silver Springs and the Ocala monkeys, which are not only just crazy and run all over the place, but are also pretty diseased, he's the guy who brought those to Silver Springs. And one of the things that he did a few years after the Animal Kingdom, Silver Springs did a really good job of adding attractions to keep their popularity going. Was he started what's known as the Seminole Village. And so he built this little replica of the Seminole Village. I almost did this show, or did this part of the story next week when I do curses. It said that when he did that, though, he actually destroyed some Seminole mounds that were on the land where he built the Seminole Village. So he built his play village on top of what used to be a real village. But a very weird thing happened. When Ross took over, or when Allen took over and he started to tell these new stories, or there started to be a new focus, Bernice and Claire went away, and they were replaced by Navarro and Tutela, right? And the story is exactly the same. And I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. I wish I had my daughter here. She always corrects my pronunciation. It's the exact same story. They would meet on the water. They would sail around the bridal chamber talking about their love for each other, but they weren't supposed to be. They were from rival tribes. And they would meet and kiss over what is here, which is called the Twisted Branch. And this really exists. It's still in Silver Springs. You can go there. And it said if you sit on this branch right here and you kiss the person who you love, they will be with you forever. They suffered the same exact fate. Navarro was sent off to help negotiate a treaty with a neighboring tribe that they had been warring with. Tallulah, in her grief, wrapped all of these rocks around her and dove into the water and died at the bridal chamber. When Navarro eventually made his way back and found out that she had committed suicide, he did the same exact thing that Claire did. He jumped into the water, never to be seen again. Except for, once again, their ghosts are said to be seen on the water. Their ghosts are what explain the balls of light and the canoe that's seen mysteriously sailing on the water. There's another really interesting legend associated with those two, which is right here. It said that Tallulah absolutely loved the white flowers that grew in the water at Silver Springs. And as she was dying, she put a little bit of a curse or a little bit of a blessing, depending on how you look at it. And it goes that if you put one of those flowers in your left shoe, you will find the person that you love and you will be with them forever. It said that if you put one in both shoes, someone who's been annoying you, a romantic interest who won't get away from you, will leave you. So I don't know what's to be said that when we went there and legend tripped this, my co-host put some in both shoes. I guess she wasn't really looking for love at that time. But really, there's another story, right? So once again, people are experiencing these things, but they keep making these stories up. And this is the story of Winona. And once again, I'm horrible with my pronunciations. Ukalawala. You guys will know this better because you know the river. And it said that river is, once again, it's named after him because of this. And you guys probably know Winona. There's probably a lot of things in Orange County that are named after her. Their story is a little bit different. Their story is that they actually were almost successful, right? They decided to get together and escape from their tribes, escape their parents, and run away with each other. A little bit more like Romeo and Juliet going on now, right? But both sides, both tribes, caught up to them, and they were chasing them through the woods, and they got to this ledge right here, and they held hands, and they jumped to their death. Which, if you're from Florida or you're living in Florida, you know that doesn't make much sense, because how often do you find ledges in Central Florida? It's actually, it's a silly part of the legend, but people tell it as frequently as they tell the other ones. And it said that the grass that grows in Silver Springs is actually Winona's hair. And so you can look at a story like that and you can say, well, it doesn't make sense. I can prove that these things didn't happen. I know, and yet there's still activity going on. There's still a whole bunch of people who are experiencing things. One of the most haunted places in Silver Springs is this hallway right here. And this hallway just has a whole bunch of different artifacts from the history of Silver Springs, one of which is this canoe, which was dug up, which was found. They found it rotting essentially at the near bottom of the water, near the abyss, near the bridal chamber, and they displayed it right here. And people have seen a lot of paranormal activity. So if you know anything about haunted objects, if there's something to this canoe being part of the story, then maybe there's something going on. Maybe even putting it in that hallway has kind of left the spirits there because we experienced it ourselves, right? We had been in that hallway, we were taking pictures, and we started to hear this weird, unexplained scratching. Now, when we were doing the radio show, we actually had heard that scratching several times when we were talking about haunted places in Central Florida, actually. And we had followed the scratching, and we followed it to my co-host's bedroom door, and we could hear the scratching, and we could hear it moving, and we could hear knocking, but we never could find out where it was from. So automatically say, well, it's probably rats or something like that. Yet we heard that exact same scratching when we were in this hallway. And it led us to this door right here. So I'm going to play a little clip. Don't worry about hearing the audio because it's really just her and I talking about how what we're seeing is really crazy. But I'm going to show you kind of what happened on this. Let me show that again to you guys. So it might be easy to try to explain that away. One more time for good measure. Now, it did that a little bit before we actually were even started the filming, and then we're like, we've got to catch this on film, so we started. We checked every way we possibly could, right? We tried to make, because they were very accommodating, Silver Spring. We tried to make doors open in other places to see if the wind would cause that to open. Nothing caused that to open whatsoever. It's a closed off area. And then, of course, no one was opening the doors on either end because we were checking that as well. Yet there are stories that many of the employees tell about being in that bathroom and having a Native American person come into the bathroom and actually seeing their feet underneath the stall, or hearing someone come in, looking through the little crack to see who it is and seeing this Native American staring at the mirror, and then they open the door and the person is gone. So even though the stories that are used to explain some of this might not make sense, the area is definitely haunted. And I'm going to keep with this Romeo and Juliet lovers can't be together theme for my next story, which is called The Story of Amos and Ingrid. And this takes place in Sarasota, Florida. Oh, you know this one?
Well, Christopher, I actually have a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
We're seeing a little toolbar at the bottom of the screen. I don't know if you can see it on yours.
This one?
Yeah, because you just click hide on that. You can just click hide as an option.
Oh, beautiful. All right, good. All right, good.
I just wanted to jump in and say that, but yeah, great presentation so far.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. All right, so that's the story of Amos and Ingrid. This was sent to me actually by someone via email. They said, have you ever explored the story of Amos and Ingrid? And one of the things that is unusual, one of the things that's like a driving force behind tripping on legends is this thing we call #FollowTheSigns, right? And this was right around Christmas time. My parents were down from New Hampshire, and they were going actually to Sarasota where this takes place. And someone emailed me and they said, you know the story of Amos and Ingrid? And they sent me this postcard that you see right here, a picture of this postcard. My parents went to eat. They went to eat in the place in the Amish area of Sarasota, and boom, they actually saw this postcard. It was sitting right next to where they were eating, and they sent it to me. And I knew this was a story that I definitely had to follow up on. So the story goes that Amos was selling celery for his father. Amos is an Amish farmer, and he met this absolutely beautiful woman, this beautiful English woman, I should say, named Ingrid. And Ingrid was not allowed to be with Amos, and Amos was not allowed to be with Ingrid. So it's the same kind of story. And yet they would meet at the Amish bridge, which was right at the border, right on the border, I should say, between the Amish section of Sarasota and the English section of Sarasota. And they would meet under the bridge. They would maybe do a little bit of kissing, and they would talk about their futures together. So one night they were told, or they made a plan to meet each other, and Amos got delayed. And he wasn't able to make it there on time. Now, Ingrid was sitting there waiting for him, dreaming of a life with the man that she loved, and she decided to go and pick some flowers out of the water. And she went too far, and she slipped. She slipped into the water, and she ripped her dress, and she cut her leg, and she was sitting there wet in the water. And she didn't live too far away, so she thought, oh my word, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm just going to go home and change really quick. So for some reason, she takes off her dress. She's still wearing her undergarments, we hope. She takes off her dress and runs home because she doesn't want her parents to see that, her dress is soaked and bloody and stuff like that. In the interim, Amos is able to get away from his parents. He goes to the water and he finds the dress. Not only does he find the dress, but he actually finds it in the mouth of an alligator, right? So the alligator has the dress in his mouth. He assumes that the woman he loved has died, and he jumps to his death from the bridge because he can't stand to be without her anymore. Well, Ingrid shows up a little bit later, and she sees the man that she loves now lying face down in the water, dead. She goes down, she checks him, she realizes he's not alive, and she goes up to the top of the bridge, and she jumps to her death as well. And it's said, and you can kind of even see the way it looks in this picture here. I only saw this picture last night. This picture is from 1937, which means the legend is at least that old. Why they look so creepy, I don't know. Maybe love does that to you sometimes. But it's said that their souls cannot find each other, that they are being punished for an eternity. And every night they come to this, to the bridge and underneath it, and they reach out to each other. They try to be with each other. They try to cross the water, and yet they can't. So for eternity, they're forced to see each other, to be in the same place, but to never actually be with each other. And it's really kind of a sad story. And this is a story that's pretty well known amongst older people. Now, I went to that area, and the Amish, I was able to talk to some of the Amish people about it. They had never heard the story. I was able to talk to some of the locals about it. They had never heard the story. And yet, when I went into the restaurants, or I went to people who had lived in Pinecrest a longer time, they had heard the story, or they remember hearing it as a child. And I've never been able to meet someone who's actually seen this. And I think that there's a reason for that. I think that more than being a story about two people who couldn't find each other, it's really a warning. It's really designed to keep kids away from that section of the water. And there are two big reasons for that. The first, well, three really. The water, it's not too horrible, but there are a lot of rocks. I find it hard to believe you could actually jump from the bridge and die from it. But there are a lot of both English and Amish people who have made like temporary, you can see it kind of here, temporary homes there, right? There are a lot of homeless people, and even a lot of homeless Amish people who make their houses all along this water. To me, that's kind of sketchy. I would want to warn my kids not to be in an area where there are a lot of drifters, where there are a lot of homeless people. But the bigger reason is the alligators, right? The story even involves one. He's kind of like a minor player in it, but I think that it's actually a real warning to people to stay away from that area because there are alligators. When I went there, I came across two fishermen, some really creepy guy on a bike, and the woman who owns the land behind where this bridge is. All four of them, all they wanted to talk about were how many alligators were in there. And we saw several of them while we were there, and the people were like, nope, that's the little one. That's the little one. Trust me, there's a bigger one. There's one like twice that size here. So there's a reason why people want to stay there, right? Or stay away from there. There's a reason why there's a warning. And sometimes a ghost story is a warning. And yet, what I discovered later was that we were at the wrong bridge, right? The show I host is called Tripping on Legends. And the reason why it's called Tripping on Legends is sometimes we get the legend wrong, right? Because we're following folklore and people tell it differently. We were at the wrong location the entire time. This is actually the Amish Bridge. And you can see it's very similar, but it is in complete disrepair. The one we were at was like on a main road and everything. This one's off into the woods. You know, it's destroyed in some areas, and it's definitely not able to be traveled anymore. So maybe we'll be able to go to the real bridge, and we actually will catch something. It's funny. I went there with my daughter and her friend one day, and we brought celery, and we offered celery, and we brought flowers, trying to get them to talk to us. And I did the same thing with my co-host at that time. Nothing happened, but we're definitely going to now go to the real bridge. So if any of you guys want to join me, maybe we can make a trip one night. But then there's one that's a little bit closer to you guys. And like the Sarasota Bridge, this one is actually not featured in the book. So you guys are getting a little bonus content right here. And that's the story of Julia. And Julia walks at Lady Lake. So if you guys know anything about Lady Lake, the name comes from, it's kind of an interesting background. They wanted to call it, I believe, Cooper. And the locals decided on Lady Lake because that's what the Native Americans in the area called it themselves. And when asked why, they said, because, these are their words, because a white woman had died in the water. And they believed that this woman was somehow still connected to the water. And so the people of the town just kind of took that up as the name. They were like, okay, that makes sense to us. Other people say that if you are looking at Lady Lake and the lake that's at Lady Lake from the top, from the sky, it actually looks like the head of a woman. I don't know how the Native Americans would have gotten up that high to see that. So I'm going much more with there was a mysterious death at it. Julia is said to walk the road that is known as Rolling Acres. So if you ever look in a ghost book, or if you ever like go online to find a ghost in Central Florida, Rolling Acres comes up as one of the top hits. This is a really popular location, and it's popular because it taps into what is probably one of the most famous genres or famous motifs of folklore, which is the wandering woman. I actually got my start doing hitchhiker legends. Those were the first legends that I really looked at back in 1997. And she's a very typical ghost hitchhiker type legend. Julia is either wearing white or she is glowing white, some people say, and she walks this stretch of the road on Rolling Acres, and she's just seen crossing the street. And people have claimed to see this for years, for decades. Sometimes she'll be walking on the side of the road, and people pick her up. Sometimes when you're driving down Rolling Acres and you approach the intersection where it starts to become a dirt road, it's said that she appears in your back seat. Now, these are all extremely popular stories, right? No matter where you're from in the United States, you're not too far from a woman in white walking down a road who sometimes appears in your back seat, who sometimes you hit accidentally. And yet the people, this is one of the only stories like that I've experienced, where there are just dozens of people online who have reported really seeing this. Now, whether they're lying or not, it's always hard to tell, but they're taking the time to actually tell their story about it. It's a very popular story. The area itself is really haunted. There's a lot of ghostly activity that happens there. And the weird thing is that no matter what happens, they seem to blame it on Julia. So people have said they've have stuff moving in their house and they live near Rolling Acres and they claim it was Julia. Or they see a woman in their house, a ghostly woman in their house. And there are, once again, a lot of reports of this in that area, and they automatically assume it's Julia. So Julia is like a celebrity in that part of the world. And there's another thing that's attached to it. If you go to this intersection that's right here, the best thing that they say to do, if you don't see Julia naturally, is to go to this intersection at night, turn off the lights in your car, turn off the engine, honk 3 times, and then turn the lights back on, the car back on, and she'll appear in your headlights. This is a very popular aspect to the myth that I've seen in different places. I've actually seen it in other places in Florida. But there's another thing that people say happened. They say if you go to that intersection and you turn off your car and you turn off your lights, you'll start to hear an unexplained growling coming from the woods. Now, there are a lot of animals there, and if you were in the woods, this is, essentially on the border of the Ocala National Forest, yet it's not actually that wooded. We went there at night, and it was really creepy, and then I went there during the day, and I was like, oh, there's a home right there. There's a home right there. At night, it has the presence of being in the woods, but it's actually a fairly residential area. So, yes, maybe there's an animal in the woods, but there's also something else that's heard, and that's children crying. Children are heard crying in the woods, and some are heard screaming for mommy, right? And some are heard screaming for daddy. People never actually see these children. They just hear these wails and the cries from all around them. And then when they start the car, it all disappears. So there's definitely something weird going on there. And oftentimes when I do these things, I'm determined to try to explain why this is happening. Not like the people you see on TV debunking, but like, where is this ghost maybe really from? And I think I might have solved this one. Back in the 1960s, when it was still before he was caught and before he was infamous, two women disappeared from Altoona. Nancy Lechner and Pamela Nader had gone to the park in Altoona. I believe it's Alexander Park in Altoona, Alexander Springs, and they had all intention of diving. They were part of a diving club. And they walked off into the woods, or their boyfriends walked off into the woods. When they came back, the women were gone. And their stuff was left behind, right? These women were never found whatsoever. This patrol boat right here, when I was doing my research into Lady Lake, this patrol boat was basically went into Lady Lake and was looking for these two women. They believed that for some reason, that these women were not still in Altoona, but they, for some reason, had made their way, or whoever had abducted them, or whatever reason they were missing, it led to Lady Lake. Now, these two ladies, their bodies have never been found. No one has ever been officially charged with their crime. If you were here for my presentation last week, you remember Gerald John Schaefer, one of the most notorious serial killers in the history of Florida. He's someone who was very active in Central Florida and Northern Florida during the 60s and the early 70s until he was caught in 1973. He was the guy who was responsible for the murders at the Devil's Tree that we had discussed last week. Well, even though he was never officially charged with their murders, even though there's never been evidence that's been put forth to say why, the police essentially have closed the case and said that Gerald Schaefer was the man who abducted and murdered these women, that they found evidence linking him, even though they've never made it public. Now, his motif, like his kind of MO, I should say, was to abduct women, and he had a preference for abducting them in pairs, and then he would take them to a central location. So because there's no car accident that connects anyone on that road who had died with a Julia, because there's no death that we can say, okay, well, was the spark of Julia, and yet the legend started around the same time that Nancy and Pamela were abducted, it's one of my theories is that the ghost is one of these ladies. Now, of course, we put the name Julia on it because it's more familiar to us, right? Whoever heard of the ghost of Nancy? But Julia is a name that we can all connect to. All these ghosts that no one can ever identify, they're always Julia or Mary or Jennifer or something that is a very common name. And so it is really truly my belief that the ghost is one of these ladies who was murdered in Lady Lake and is still trying to find her way home. Lastly, we're going to talk about what has to be the most haunted location in the state of Florida. Everyone will say it's the Devil's Tree. I'm going to go with Fort DeSoto. I want you to look at the picture in the middle. Unfortunately, I'm a teacher. I'm a high school teacher. And of course, when parents and children learn who the teachers are, they always Google them, right? Or they try to find information about them, especially if something goes wrong. They want to learn more. Who is this guy teaching my kids? Unfortunately, I cannot get it off the internet. This picture here in the middle is one they find, right? It's one of the first pictures of me that comes up. It's a promotional picture that I made for our episodes on Fort DeSoto. And if you can read it here, Troopers 42, we're an adventurous couple, ? Seeking new experiences. It's hilarious because if you know the show and you read the description, you realize that everything we're talking about has to do with legends that we've tripped together, right? And yet, if you don't know what it is and you just find it and you see this Tinder profile, you think that something very different is going on. And so kids are always asking me because they find that picture like, what was going on here? But it's not, right? It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with trying to capture one of the really popular ghosts that is in Fort DeSoto. Fort DeSoto I like to call Fort Inconsequential, right? It never fired its guns in battle. It never, it was essentially designed to support the fort that was in Egmont Key. They had actually tried to build a Fort DeSoto a little further north and in, and they built it on phosphorus, and they couldn't get water to it, so they had to tear it down and build this other Fort DeSoto. I'm of a firm belief DeSoto is one of the worst men in Florida history. We sometimes forget it because we get really cute with our connection to Native Americans and the Spanish coming in and all the stuff like that. DeSoto did a lot of really bad things. And one of the things I've noticed in Florida is that things that are named after him tend to be really haunted and tend to be failures, or they fall for some reason. If you look at DeSoto, and I'm not talking about DeSoto County, if people know people there, it's not like that's a depressed area, but actually DeSoto County is one of the most haunted counties in Florida. There are always crazy stories coming out of there. This essentially was the fort that no one wanted to be at, right? People who were stationed there would write letters home about how miserable it was there. It was too hot. They never saw any action. From 1889 to 1937, it was actually used more as a quarantine. So new people trying to get into Tampa would have to go through Fort DeSoto, and if they were sick at all, they were forced into quarantine, especially yellow fever, which was a huge killer back at that time. And it's said that a lot of soldiers died there from sickness. Obviously, a lot of people who were quarantined died there, and that the armament, so what you see on the right here, this armament right here is extremely haunted by the ghosts of people who never actually shot guns in war. That just so many people died on that area or in that area that their ghosts remain there. One of my favorite stories attached to it, other than the ones we're going to talk about, is on this beach right here. It's said that someone who's dressed as a soldier walks on the beach, drenching wet, exhausted, collapses into the sand, and then disappears. Right? So all these really great hauntings that you might experience if you go to Fort DeSoto. But what brought us there, which is hence the Tinder profile promotion, what brought us there was actually love. And there's two very different forms of love. The first is the story of the flirty fisherman. Now, this in these different areas of Fort DeSoto, this is a place called Bungaloo Pass, and then we have Fort DeSoto Gulf Pier. And then this is actually the pier itself that goes out into the water. All of these are said to be haunted by an attractive, middle-aged man who is known to flirt and try to pick up single women who are also fishing in that area, right? So if a woman goes out there and she's fishing, and this has been reported multiple times, it was first talked about in the book, The Tampa Triangle. If you go out there and you're by yourself and you're a woman, chances are this guy is going to appear and start talking to you. And he's attractive, and he's funny, and he's engaging, and he's talking to you not as if, he's had died. And these girls actually kind of start liking him, and then they do something and they look and he's disappeared. And sometimes they just hear a little bit of a laugh afterwards. So when we went there, we wanted to try to pick this guy up. So my co-host, that's actually her walking down the pier, she fished in all of these locations trying to get the flirty fisherman to talk to. And a lot of people believe it's Dalton Gray. And Dalton Gray was a local who actually died a pretty horrific death on the other side of Florida. But he was a local. He worked at this little pier shop right here. He was known as a fisherman. He was known as a really flirtatious guy. By the descriptions that some of the witnesses have given, the people who were there totally believe that this has got to be Dalton, that every description of him matches, including the personality and little phrases that he said. It's funny because if you call that shop and you ask about Dalton Gray, and if you ask whether Dalton Gray was ever worked there, and I've done it 3 times, the response they always give is, I'm supposed to say, I don't know what you're talking about. I've always gotten young people on the phone. And so this is obviously a frequent enough event that people actually are told if they're working there and anyone calls and asks about Dalton to say he never worked here. I don't know what you're talking about. But the way they always phrase it is, I'm supposed to tell you that Dalton Gray, I don't know who Dalton Gray is, or I don't know who you're talking about. But then there's another love story that's playing itself out, and it's a very different kind of one. Like I said, it was a quarantine for yellow fever. In addition to that, in the 1980s, in 1980, when the Skyway Bridge fell, the Skyway Bridge was right near this. The people who died in the crash when the Skyway Bridge fell were brought to Fort DeSoto and brought to the hospital. This is the foundation of the hospital right here. And that's kind of acted as a morgue for that. And people say that this area is extremely haunted because of that people have seen people walking out of the water. People have seen, once again, orbs walking and floating around this area. But there's one ghost in particular that drew us in. And that ghost is of a mother. So it's a different kind of love. Now, the way it was configured, depending on your level of the disease, depending on how sick you were with yellow fever, you were staying in different structures. And it said that this mother, who was not that sick, had children who became very sick. And when they were put into a separate building and they died. And not only did they die, but as was the protocol, she was not allowed to see her children after they went away, right? She wasn't actually able to bury them herself. She wasn't able to be with them during their last moments. And it said that she died of grief a short time later, and she still walks around this area crying and calling out for her children. And then you can see her figure kind of walking here, and you can definitely hear cries that you can't explain, and screams, and sometimes names. This was the ghost that we really wanted to talk to, and you can actually see a picture here of my co-host. She's at the foundation, and she's just trying to have a conversation and tape a conversation and talk to this woman. And this was a really profound experience for us. We call this the legend trip that ended the show, because it's very interesting to go out and look for ghosts. It's very interesting to look and explore these legends. But when you actually kind of get the other side of it, it can have a profound effect on you. We like to be scared. We like to be freaked out by ghosts, right? And yet there's also this element to it where every once in a while you're broken out of that, and you actually realize that you're talking to someone who might have suffered from immense pain or who might be in great sorrow. And that's kind of what happened when we were at Fort DeSoto. It kind of shifted. It was originally supposed to be this fun, like, let's see if we can have fun and get the ghost fisherman to pick you up and flirt with you. And it ended essentially with us making contact with this mother. I'm going to play some EVPs for you. So if you have headphones, plug them in. If you have, if you're on a computer, turn it up as loud as you possibly can. We were experimenting with these before, trying to get the sound as best as we can with you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play these, and then I'm going to kind of guide you through what you're hearing. But I will tell you this, in all of them, you're going to hear a little bit of something, and then I'm going to repeat where the actual voice of the ghost is. And then we're going to play it again, and I'll kind of tell you what to listen for. So here's the first one. This one was captured as we started making our way out to this location. We went from the armament to this hospital foundation. And as soon as we got to the hospital foundation, this is what I got. Now, when you do this long enough, you develop what we call EVP ears. EVPs are electronic voice phenomenon. So it's voices on tape that you capture because the tape recorder you're using has a bigger range of sound or a wider range of sound. So you catch these little glimpses of voices that you can't explain. So even if you're having a hard time understanding what's being said, you can at least hear that there's some weird noise there. And what it's actually saying is, so again, you'll hear like a little bit of the rustling as I'm walking, and then you'll hear a voice say, "We are not what you expected," and then it'll loop afterwards. So let's try to listen to it again. It's "We are not what you expected," or what you're expecting. Sorry. The second one that I'm going to show you is actually right in the armament. And I went over the sound recordings of it. We're not obsessed with evidence, but we always look at it afterwards. And one of the things I noticed was that there was a lot of voices telling me to get out. I don't like you. Get out of here. And this is one of the ones I captured that I thought was especially interesting. I'll play once again. I'll play it and then I'll explain what I'm hearing. Now it repeats. So essentially what's happening is I'm asking them to make contact with me, and they say, "You talk to us too much." So it's a little weird. This next one, I rediscovered last night as I was kind of polishing up this presentation, decided to put a few more in here. This is as we got to the location again. So we got to the location and we start talking, and you're going to hear there's a little bit of a conversation between us. This is an interesting EVP in that it exists kind of between us talking. And so you have to kind of really listen close to it. But I'll let you try to hear the little boy that's in this one. Well, you can. That way So that occurs between her saying, between Natalie talking and then me talking, and it says, it's a little boy or a little girl, and and they say, "You scared me." I'm gonna play it again for you guys. Well, you can. That way. So that one, when I heard it last night, I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot how amazing this was." Now, when we did our episode, usually what we do is we do a follow-up episode where we say, "All right, here's kind of like what we discovered. Here's all things." We didn't do that with this one because this was really a heartbreaking one, and it was a heartbreaking one because of the EVP that I'm going to play you right now. Our general rule is we don't post an EVP. That last one I messed with a little bit to turn up the volume. We don't manipulate the EVPs. We don't put effects on them so people hear them more. If we don't hear it with our ears in the car on the way home, we don't go searching for it. And we heard this one minutes after we had left. And it's really, really powerful. And like I said, it ended up being so emotional that we, for a while, stopped doing the show. And my co-host, essentially, this was one of the reasons why she left the show, because it was so powerful. Because, well, I'll let you guys hear it. So I'll play it, and then I'll tell you what the actual EVP is going on. Now it's the repeat. So what's happening there is that Natalie is saying, essentially, I'm a mother too. It sucks. I know it sucks. And right after that, you hear a very low voice, very sad, and it says, "You don't know how it feels." And when we heard over the car speakers, it was crazy. I'm going to play it one more time for you guys. She says, after Natalie says, "It sucks," she said, or I know it. And the voice says, "You don't know how it feels."
Except for not living in Florida, right? Sure, it sucks. Yeah, it sucks.
So does anybody have any questions? That's one of those things where, I've tried to catch the gamut tonight because legend tripping is often like that. The book, Haunted Florida Love Stories, is a lot like that, right? It touches upon these ones that are very emotional and ones that are spooky and ones that are scary. And it kind of runs the gamut of those kinds of things. A ghost story is never straightforward, right? There's got a lot of elements to it. And if you get the book, you'll kind of see like a lot of that stuff is going on. There are some stories that are happy. There are some stories that are sad. There are some stories that'll kind of make you wish that you hadn't read them. But I will tell you this for you guys tonight, because I love my Orange County people so much. You guys have been an amazing crowd and been checking in with me. This book is not out for 2 more weeks yet. If you, in the next couple of days, go to Facebook, so facebook.com/trippingonlegends or /Haunted Florida Love Stories. You like the page, so you can get all the updates that I put out there. Like the page, and then send me a message that says, hello from Orange County. Even if you're not in Orange County, if you just kind of found your way here, I will send you an autographed copy of this next week after Labor Day. I'll mail them out on Tuesday for you. And instead of the $22 that they're charging on Amazon, you can get your copy in advance. You can get it autographed for only $17 and no shipping costs, just $17. It's an all-in-one price. So I would love, does anybody have any questions or any concerns or any?
Hey, Christopher. Let me take this.
That's me.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I don't see any questions in the chat. If you do have them, please post those to the comments. We'll be looking at those and getting those questions out as quickly as possible. I did post a link to the Tripping on Legends Facebook page. So if you did want a copy of that book, please message Christopher or message the Tripping on Legends Facebook page, and you'll be able to get a copy. Just let them know that you're from Orange County or watching from the Orange County Facebook, and we will make sure.
And also you can do it from Facebook /Florida Haunted Love Stories. The book has its own page, and you can do it through that as well.
Right on. So if you like these stories and you want to hear, see more and more information about the book, check that out. We have a couple of questions popping in right now. Pam,
hey, let me drink out of my Robert the Doll cup as you asked them.
We got a Robert the Doll. I think
Robert the Doll picture, Robert the Doll cup.
So Pam had a couple things she's been really curious about of the actual legend tripping in general throughout the chat. But are there any Florida legends that you're planning on exploring soon that you might not have you want to leave out?
Yeah, there is. So I'm finishing up my book on haunted Ocala. So it's kind of assuming me and I'm in the house, or I'm in the Ocala following up on stories. But there is an amazing legend from it's called Coon Hill. It's the legend of Coon Hill Cemetery in the Panhandle. And essentially this town, which was called Coon Hill after raccoons, keep in mind, was abandoned because they just found a better place. And they built this cemetery. And as they were leaving, they used the cement from some of the houses to build a wall around this cemetery to keep they say to keep nature out, but I think there's something else going on. And it said you can't walk around the entire length of this wall without being pushed off by unseen hands.
Whoa.
So I do have an episode where we explore the legend, stuff like that, but that's the one I want to get up to. And of course, it's in the Panhandle, and I'm down here, so it's like an 87-hour ride to get up there. But that's like, once this book is finished, I can actually legend trip again. That's the first one that I'm doing.
Awesome. That sounds really cool. We have another one from Felicia. Why do ghost stories seem to be all very old? I guess it's time.
Gotcha. All right. So I don't think, great question. It's a two-to question. I don't think hauntings are old, right? Or they could be sometimes, but it's the story. And the reason why it's the story is because it has to be old enough to not be proven. Right? Or to say, oh, but they don't have records from back then. Or you're not going to find it in the newspaper. It was like 30 years ago. So it's the distance actually from what might have been the real event, which makes it spooky because you can't follow up on it. right? You can become part of the legend by knowing it, by saying you've even experienced it, but the backstory is just out of reach in terms of time for you to be able to do it. Like, oh, there's no one left in that area that remembers this, but it used to be this house there. That's the kind of thing, and it adds this mystique to it, and it adds a credibility to it the further away you are from it.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Give them time to like kind of dust off. There's a little bit of
exactly. And I think it's also it takes time, and I've discovered this as a folklorist. It takes time for people to perfect the story, right? So someone tells the story of Julia and it doesn't make sense. Now, I'm sorry, I didn't even get to it. Julia was killed by a man who she loved, who she betrayed, right? So, well, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. Why did he kill her? Oh, because, and so they edit the story a little bit. And you edit the story a little bit, and you change the story around because someone asks a question. And then, of course, the game of telephone, it changes when you tell it to one person. So the reason why one of these stories or these ghost stories are old is they're like wine, right? They get better with age because you start to plug in all the little holes and all the little gaps in the story until it becomes something that can really be digested by someone. I must be hungry. I'm doing food and wine analogies.
So we got another one from Lida. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry if I'm not. She was saying great presentation, but she was also asking, are you only writing Florida stories, or do you go out of state at all with any of your books or the stories that you trip to?
So I have 9 books altogether. This is actually my very first Florida one. The show Tripping on Legends, what we essentially do is we start with the core as a Florida legend, and then we use that to explore famous cases that might be in other states. So the show actually does talk about that. And, probably my most popular book is a book called Haunted Objects, which we're working on making a second edition of it and then a follow-up. And that's all across the country. And actually, I think there's one even from Europe in it. And that's famous cases, but then also personal stories that people have shared with us over the years and things like that. So, it's funny because anyone who knows me probably thinks of me more as a New England ghost story person because this is my first Florida one. So I do touch other places. And of course, I'm always willing to hear legends from wherever people are from.
Absolutely. And you kind of hit on that last time where some of the stories share a lot of similarities between each thing.
Exactly.
They might have the same Lady on the Lake or something like that is like a story that's
right.
told.
Exactly. Like who doesn't come from a town that has a woman in white walking somewhere, usually a bridge or something. It's very common folklore motif.
Yeah, that's great and awesome. Please check out his Facebook page. Every week the podcast, is it weekly podcast? I forget exactly.
It's broadcast live weekly 9 o'clock Tuesdays at midnight FM, and I always post it. I always broadcast it on my Facebook and my Instagram. My Facebook is Tripping on Legends. My Instagram is Spooky Tripping. So if you follow me on any of those things, I go live on Tuesdays at 9 o'clock, and then usually I edit the video up and I post it up in the next couple days. So
find your whatever podcast you use, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever you're using.
Okay, why'd you say Spotify? Spotify doesn't carry me.
Oh, no. Okay, not Spotify. Anything
I'm kidding.
Spotify.
I'm on literally everything other than Spotify. I want to take the videos out, and I can't. I don't have the heart to do it. So
it's annoying. Yeah, I know they've been doing a lot lately, but but definitely check out those. There's tons of great podcasting apps that you can check out, and it's an awesome podcast. I've listened to a few episodes myself. Think it's really great. So if you're interested in anything more like this, you want to hear more legends, more great stories from Christopher, I think you're a fantastic storyteller. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, it's an awesome podcast. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. Like I said, this is part of the NEA Big Read series. So please check out this page. You can request a free copy of Pretty Monsters from that. Also, if you like this podcast, you want to see more of Christopher or more events like this, there is a survey on the right hand side of that page. Just take a survey, fill out some more information. You can sing Christopher's praises and all the great stuff. That we're doing. So we're happy to have you back, and you will be back next week. We'll talk to you one more time on Thursday. Next Thursday at 9, we'll be talking about ghostly curses. So I'm pretty curious about that one. You see a little bit more of the darker side, I guess, or
Yes, definitely, yes.
yeah.
We'll be going on both sides of the state to capture that stuff, including somewhat in Central Florida that people can actually visit. So
hey, can't wait. Oh, we'll see you next Thursday, Christopher, and we'll see you all next Thursday. Thank you all so much for coming. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great one.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to find out when we have new fun and informative videos for you. Orange County Library System is your place to learn, grow, connect.